back to another episode of the Lifestyle Series. Today, we have a very special guest. So it's me, Christina. It's Coach Tyler, who's like hanging out all the time now. And then we have Coach Danika. And that's super exciting because Danika is like our mindset specialist, helps keep all of our heads on straight. So hello, Danika. We're so happy to have you.
Hello. I am so happy to be on here.
So today we are talking about overcoming psychological barriers and how kind of butting your head up against that mental wall might be what's holding you back, and how like shifting that a little bit might help you a little bit get to, I said a little bit a lot, that's 3 times now. It might help you get to where you want to be. So why don't you kind of lead us into it? Like, what would be, when you hear this topic, Danika, what's the first thing that you're like, oh, this is something we should cover?
Yeah, I love this topic because I find that a lot of the times we don't recognize that it's not a physical challenge. Like, yes, physical challenges exist, but it's the way in which we navigate through that physical challenge that will actually bring more challenge to that obstacle. Does that make sense? Like, if our mindset is shifted, then that either helps us, deters us, or makes things worse as we navigate through obstacles. And I feel like often we don't recognize that we actually can tap into that power, that we can be bulldozers, and we are the ones that are able to kind of make the path a little more smooth. And it's hard, right? I think that's maybe why a challenge is easy to like look at a challenge and be like, meh, I don't want to do it. I give up. Like, it's too hard. It's too difficult, right? But to actually kind of zoom out and provide like psychological distancing and recognize like, okay, cool. Like, this task is in front of me. This challenge has presented itself. If I were to tweak my mindset and the approach or the lens that I view this, can I better navigate it? Like, can I see it presented more as an opportunity as opposed to a challenge that's just going to stop me in my tracks? And everybody has this, right? Like, everybody, to include like our toddlers, that tying your shoes is a really big challenge, right? And like, that's a big task to ask a little one to learn and to like do it on time. Like, poor kid has to learn it fast. But if we looked at it and like presented it to them and they got to see it as an opportunity to grow and to gain another skill, and that it would help them down the road, then they would be able to better navigate it.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up, because teaching somebody how to tie their own shoes is not something I thought would be so very difficult. So it's crazy. And I found a really nifty video that if you're in that like world right now, I can send you. They got Cora to figure it out super easy.
Yeah.
We had to do it for cheer practice, where I was like, you are the only one who can't do this, and you need to figure your life out and be able to tie your own shoes these days. And actually, that's how like Riker didn't know how to effectively tie his shoes until he was like 8, almost 9. And that's because shoes these days, they don't need to. And it's funny because that actually kind of makes me think about like having to walk into these challenges like ready for stuff and things, and how in a lot of ways these days, I feel like people are either automatically given that grace because we've gotten so deep into the land of like mental health and self-care and like things like that, which is fantastic. And I'm really glad that that's become a big part of like what our generation is trying to focus on more. And it's like trickling down. But I feel like sometimes it gets to an extent where it's like, you don't have to push yourself. You don't have to do too much. You don't have to take on these things. And then I feel like it kind of gives that freedom to never be challenged. And I tie that back to shoes, because like so many kids' shoes going all the way up through the children's sizes don't even have laces anymore.
Isn't that pathetic?
Yeah. So they don't even have to learn. And for Riker, it literally wasn't until he's so tall and so big now that he's in men's sizes at 10. And so I was like, you're shit out of luck, friend. Like they don't put Velcro on these cool shoes anymore. Like you want Giannis's, we got him like super cool basketball shoes. And he's like, but they always come untied. And I was like, then get better, you know? And sometimes you just have to do that. And so I definitely, when I was younger, kind of shied away, especially from big, scary challenges. Like the number one, like I'm not a regretful person, except for I was going to be able to go study abroad in Australia when I was in college. And I didn't go because I was scared that I like wouldn't know people. It was going to be weird and like things like that. And so I could have spent a whole quarter of the year there and chose not to go. And that's something that like to this day bugs me that I didn't take that opportunity. And it kind of, I'm lucky because I married somebody who like runs through every wall head first. Like nothing is challenging for him, right? He's like, he's going to win it. And so it's bled over where now like I try to purposely put myself into as many of those situations and then try to stay as like calm and cool as possible so that when the really hard things do come up, it's like, well, I can get through all this other shit. And so and what's been really interesting lately, so this woman I followed on Instagram, I like didn't know her at all. I've just followed her for like a couple years. She died last week from cancer that snuck up out of nowhere. By the time they found it, it was stage 4 and like incurable. She did stuff for as long as she could. And she was literally like one day saying like, yeah, I'm in pain. I'm at home, but like, I'm doing okay. And then like 2 days later, her husband was like, I'm on here because she's gone and, you know, she's not in pain anymore. And there's like little things about even just the parenting journey and stuff that like will get to you as a mom where I've been able, and I mean, it's, you know, been a week of thinking this way, but I hope this sticks around where I'm like, she's not going to get to experience that. And she probably would have loved the opportunity to be drowning in children, or like we got our family pictures back and it's like crow's feet city all over the place. And for the first time, I wasn't like, maybe I should start Botox. It was like, well, you know, she like passed in her like early to mid 30s. Like she's not going to get to see her face with like the deep laugh lines and things like that. So trying to look at it as an opportunity, like you said, to like, how can I grow through this? How can I come through stronger? And I think seeking that stuff out is important so that you're not just reacting to the things that you don't see coming.
Yeah. And I think it also provides a sense of like resiliency. Like, I think that is such an important characteristic and skill to have as you navigate through life, to be resilient through any obstacle or challenges that are coming your way. And if we're just skirting by, and Matt, my husband, is very similar to yours, Christina, but he has said to me before too that people are becoming weak. Like people are just becoming weak people. And if a challenge existed, we find the most convenient way to kind of get the job done or skirt by and not kind of see the conflict as it is, and then have conflict resolution and persevere, right? Like that is really important for human beings. And that is a missed skill maybe in the world of like convenience nowadays. I mean, you talk about like the shoes are a huge example. How convenient to put on a shoe that just slides on or velcros on, right? Like then you don't even have to apply a skill that's pretty tactical. Like you have to know how to tie a knot, and you should know how to tie a knot, ladies and gentlemen. Like that's a pretty big skill to have in the world. But it provides, you know, resiliency to be able to go through a challenge or an obstacle and have a good mindset, not dismissing that it's challenging. These are human emotions. You should get scared. you should get angry. You should have frustration. You should feel all those things like, oh man, I wish this didn't happen. You should feel that. And then you should be able to say, but I know that I'm powerful enough and capable enough to get through this. Like, this is just a little speed bump. I'm not going to let it take power over me so much so that I lose out on any opportunity of growth, or honestly, big opportunities too, right? Like, I think if we operate off of a fear base, we miss out on a lot of opportunities. So to be able to say, Roger that, like, I got these emotions that are like, I'm fearful, I'm overwhelmed, I'm frustrated, I don't want to do it. Like, everything in all cells are like, no, shut it down. And you can say, I'm good. Like, I'm so powerful and capable of doing this that I'm good. I got this. And then move through it.
Yeah.
I think like an important thing, we've kind of mentioned is like, it's a skill. So guess what? Skills get better over time, the more that you continue to practice it. And so it's like one of those things where it's like, you are starting at some point, right? Maybe your skill level of resiliency isn't where you would like it to be, but that's okay. But the more that you practice that skill of just whatever it might be, like in that resiliency and wherever you may be starting, you're going to level that up. It's going to get better. You are going to be able to handle more and more the more that you continue to practice that skill. And so I think that's also a good thing to remind yourself when it does feel like shit and it does feel uncomfortable. It's supposed to. Every new skill that you learn is going to be uncomfortable. Like, that is the point of skill acquisition, whether it's learning to track your macros, learning to meal plan, learning to go to the gym a few times a week, like whatever it might be. If it's brand new to you, it's going to be uncomfortable, but that means that you are going to get better at it. Like, me and my wife, like, we have an almost 3-year-old. We were together for nearly 10 years without a kid, very cheap rent, full-time working, traveled the world, did whatever we wanted. There was a lot of skill adjustment in terms of stress management, resiliency, and like learning a lot of things in those first couple of years. And it was really hard. But guess what? It's starting to get better. We're starting to, okay, now we kind of know where things are at. And so I think that's an important thing to really touch on, is that it may suck at first, but it is going to get better the more that you do practice it. And so I think that's kind of a lean into it, right? Like, it's going to be okay because it is a skill.
Yeah. So I love either listening to the Nick Bear podcast or watching his YouTube while I'm running, because he's somebody that, I mean, just routinely kicks his own ass, right? Like, he hits one limit and he finds a way to keep pushing through it. And so it gets me fired up if I'm trapped on the treadmill for like a 9-mile run. You can't watch his stuff and then be like, I'm not going to finish my workout today, because then you'll feel extra terrible. And something he said in a video I was watching like last week, he was talking about how you can't have growth without some growing pains. Like, they come together from like the smallest thing of our toddlers getting bigger to, stretching your mindset into a new situation, learning to do something new, pushing harder in a workout and things. And I think that that's probably the main like roadblock that I hear about with clients and stuff when they've set a big goal for themselves, even if it's, I just want to be in more shape. Like, I want to be in better shape, or like something like that. But then it'll get to a point where, like the stuff you talked about, Tyler, was like just like parenting and having to figure out this new lifestyle. Sometimes it'll get, with parenting, you can't really be like, never mind, I'm just going to return it. I don't want to be part of this.
No, I'm good.
You really kind of have to push through that one.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to changing your lifestyle, I think that's where it can be easy to be like, I don't know if this is for me. And then kind of back out of it as soon as you hit those growing pains. But I'm constantly telling my clients when they're going into some scary new thing, where a lot of times it's, a vacation or a party or a date night or, anything like that, where maybe things can't, if they've been able to be like totally consistent and in control. And then now that control is being taken away. That can be super scary. And it's like, you know, if you can get through this, if you tell yourself, you know, I'm not going to use this to be untracked or fall off plan, I'm going to stick to it. And I'm going to see what it feels like to go into this with my goals in mind and enjoy it in a different way and get through tonight. The next time you have to do that, it's going to be 100% easier because you have that experience. You tried it out. And it's kind of like the same thing with like competitive clients, right? When they ask how many, like what classes should they sign up for and stuff. And I'll be like, the works, like, especially for your first show, do it all. Because that first time you walk on stage, like I have the worst stage fright in the whole wide world. My last show, I tripped on stage and then I yelled fuck and then went through my posing routine.
That's so awesome.
Beat red and completely miserable. Like it was the absolute worst. I'm the person who stands up there and like shakes like a leaf the entire time. But I had done like 2 or 3 classes for that last one, just because it had been a while since I had been up there and I wanted the opportunity to go up there, look like a crazy person. And then the next time I came out, it was honestly like, well, it can't get worse. I've already tripped and cussed at the judges, so it can only go up from here. And so, you know, it's like, what did that feel terrible? Yes. It's like, honestly, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and I was like so anxious for the last time I got on a plane last year. It ate at me for like months and months. And I didn't used to be this way. It happened with like parenthood. And like I was so scared. I'd canceled so many trips before and stuff like that. I was like, I'm not canceling London. So we made it through that flight. It was like a million years long. And tomorrow, luckily we only have a 4-hour one, but like, it's been easier because I didn't back out of like the last big trip and I know the enjoyment I got out of it. And so I've been trying to just really focus on that instead of like completely ruining the last month of my life, just being anxious every time I saw a plane overhead because I had to get on one at some point. And so I think just really, I talk about like the neurological pathways with like exercise, where you got to keep driving that car down that dirt road. You got to keep it dust free and keep it used. And it's the same thing when you're building up like mental strength, is that you have to put yourself there and, you know, test the water, see how it feels, and then slowly get deeper. You don't necessarily have to dive right into the deep end.
Yeah, it provides you too the ability to better emotionally regulate yourself and being able to have, I work with like fear exposure with a lot of clients. Like, what's holding you back? What do you perceive as a threat? And let's go there. Like, let's see what emotions come up and why is it scary to regulate those emotions. And sometimes we've developed really maladaptive behaviors like, oh shit, I'm starting to feel anxious, so where's the food to give me a warm, cozy hug, right? Like or like even worse, like, well, not worse because both have like extreme measures, but being able to purge because you're feeling so anxious and you have a lot of like emotions inside. You have to like release it and get it out, whether that be in the form of exercise, over exercising, or purging your food, or it could be alcoholism, like any vice, right, that doesn't serve us well. Sometimes that's how we are like, this is how I regulate it, because I'm so afraid of going through this conflict, this challenge, this existing perceived threat. And I don't know how to go through it. And being able to say, well, just because you may not know how to go through it doesn't mean that you can't go through it. You can go through it. And it's learning that you can, trusting that you can, having the support around you that you can go through this. And then learning too that now you can emotionally regulate a little bit better, right? Like now we can take those maladaptive behaviors and build really strong behaviors that support us through that emotional regulation, through that, like, I'm going to tiptoe into this. How does it feel? Let me navigate it. And then recognize like, oh my gosh, I can clear a path. Like I can clear a new path. And my old client I talked to yesterday spoke to me about a cornfield, and I loved this. She said, Our brain is like, and I've used like a highway, like a 4-lane highway before, but our brain is like a cornfield, and you have all the machinery to plow through. And even though there may be like a clear-cut path in a cornfield, but you have to do a new path, it's going to take some energy. Like, it's going to take time. It's going to take work. It's going to be challenging. You're probably going to sweat. It's probably going to feel uncomfortable, but you can create a whole new path in that cornfield. And then that path is cleared. And then you can keep going down that path. And like you said, make sure it doesn't get dusty. Make sure it doesn't get overgrown, right? Maybe the negative path, like the paths that don't serve us well, they can overgrow with a lot of other vegetation, right? But the new ones that serve us well, we are capable of growing those and then going down them.
Yeah. I like that a lot. So let's see. Do you have any specific tricks for helping people head down those paths? Like, kind of like cues. Like, we'll give people exercise cues and things like that. Like, okay, try to think about this when you're doing a squat, or do this while you're benching. Do you have anything that if somebody finds that they're hitting that like headspace where they might get into some of those behaviors where either, you know, they're some form of mental or physical, like binging or purging? Because I really feel like that covers it really well. Like, those two things really do end up mentally too, like either taking in a whole bunch of like bad information they don't need, or like over researching stuff. I'm terrible about that kind of thing. But I've even caught myself with like kind of like a mental purge where now I'm trying to be more aware of like mentally dumping or like emotionally dumping on like my mom was always one where, like, you know, I would just call her up and be like, I need to vent, and then like go. And then now I'll try to either take a step where I'm like, okay, do I really need to make that call to dump? Like, is it going to get me more fired up about something and like give more fuel to the fire of what it is I don't want to be a part of, or I don't want to be doing, or whatever? Or I'll at least take the moment to ask instead of just be like, hey, I'm going to put all of this on you. I'm like, do you have a like, are you in a place where with your day where I can emotionally dump on you right now? Because sometimes it can be heavy for you as the person that has to listen to what everybody has to say with that. But do you have any cues for like, if somebody gets to that place of like, that, you know, kind of evaluate where you're at right now, and then how do we make sure we're heading down that right place?
Yeah. So you mean like when they're starting to feel that trigger or that cue, and then what ends up happening is our subconscious mind is like, oh shit, all hands on deck, like threat perceived. What do? Oh yeah. We like eat all this food, or like we may call mom, or like we just automatically go into, oh, we know how to do this. Like, everyone keep us alive. And then our conscious mind is like way in the background, like, oh, but wait, remember we didn't want to do that? And then, but it's so quiet, and it's like this little tiny voice that tries to talk to you. And then your subconscious like, hey, go take a seat. Like, you don't need to, but our conscious mind needs to like be tapped into, right? So when that cue comes in, some things that I will tell clients is to externally stimulate themselves in a different way. So if it's in relation to food, I'll say, like, I have a lot of clients actually that I'll ask them, like, what foods do you gravitate towards? And I would say 90% would gravitate toward like soft food, or like sweet food, things that are representative of like a warm hug. And I'll say, in that moment, do you need compassion? Like, is that what you're looking for in that moment? Like someone to provide you a hug, or like feeling connected because you're feeling this disconnect or misalignment, like no one's hearing you, no one's seeing you, like you feel a little lost. So like food is always going to, like, food you can rely on, right? Like, and it doesn't talk back to you. It just helps you in that moment. And quotations are there. But I think being able to say, all right, maybe in that moment, an external stimulation that we could have would be to call a friend, or maybe it is to go take a warm bath that feels comforting, to be able to stimulate your body in a different way, to help you to know, like, there's other stimulation that you can have to help you regulate, right? And it also provides a disruptor. So my job is with almost all of my clients to provide disruptors so that they can disrupt any pattern or habit loop that they like trend with and they keep on falling into, and they want to just like stop the trend, stop the habit loop. So another disruptor might be to go outside and like feel the sun on your face, or to be able to put on some music and to have an external stimulation of music. So finding something else that's going to provide a stimulation and help your subconscious mind to not just follow into that path that we've like ridden on so many times, but we are like, oh my gosh, there's really good music. Or we call a friend and we're like, hey, I just wanted to hear your voice. We don't necessarily need to talk about the thing that is going on. We just need a distraction. We need a disruptor so that we don't fall into a pattern that doesn't serve us well, that doesn't help us in that moment, because we may feel for that 5-second time frame that it's doing good, but there's always the aftermath. And then there's the beating up of self, of being like, oh, why did I do that? I knew better. Now I feel like crap, like,
Yeah.
And then you're right back where you started. And then you're trying to like pick up the pieces again and trying to like get leverage to move forward. So if we could disrupt it when the cue starts to come in, and everybody knows their cue. Like sometimes I help people to figure out their cue. For some people, it is, by the time I get home, I just need to settle down. Well, if you've defined settling down as going right to the bottle of wine and chugging the bottle, but that's not serving you well, and you don't get good sleep, and then you wake up feeling groggy, and then you're like, oh, I'll just start fresh today. If we're still getting in that cycle, maybe it's the coming into the house. Like maybe it's the, I'm done with my work day. I come into my house. Maybe I can build something new. So maybe you go right upstairs and you take a hot shower. Maybe you literally clean off all the stress that you've kind of been exposed to during the day, instead of coming home, going into the kitchen, going to like the pantry, or going, and I'm just talking food wise. So that's a lot of what I work with. But those are some of the things, whatever external stimulation that provides you this like dopamine hit or serotonin feeling, like something that's going to kind of train your mind or rewire to think in another path.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned the shower, because cheer practice, it can be just so like stimulating, like sitting there with all of these children in this room. And especially now that I have both of my kids like at one practice, and I just want to see them do well, so I'm like emotionally invested in what they're doing. And then sitting there, like being the team mom for it, like, now I have like 19 little kids that I just want to see everyone like do well. And it's, everyone needing Band-Aids and like different stuff. So like there's so much happening. And then there's music, there's just all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And, I get home and I don't know, it's like specifically cheer is what cracks me up. There's like nothing else that like, I feel that if we go out, I guess, and I have to be like super social, I'm kind of the same way. But like every night we get home from cheer practice, I like tell the kids to go deal with themselves, like get ready for bed and stuff. And then I go straight to my shower, and like no one's allowed to talk to me. I just want to hear the water. And I feel like I have to wash off cheer. Like I really do, so that I can come down. And because we get home at like 7:45 one of the nights, and we get home at 8:45 the other night. So it is like a pretty quick transition from super stimulating to like, let's wind down and go to bed. And so that's something that when I have clients who are dealing with sleep, it being a problem, because that's a lot of it, where people feel like they want to stay up and do like the doom scrolling all night long, because it's the only time they have that's quiet and stuff. And I'll say like, okay, we don't necessarily have to not do that, but let's try adding in like a hot shower there or something, where you're just listening to the water and you feel like you're just like getting that good rinse off, get nice and warm and cozy, let your body activate its cooling systems. And sometimes that can be enough to kind of flip that switch and relax and then be able to move on. So yeah, I love that tip. That's a big one for me.
It helps you too to like regulate your nervous system. If we're always, and sometimes I have to remind people. So when I have like an initial intake and they'll say, I just feel so drained sometimes, and like then I get super anxious and I can't sleep well. And so I feel like the way that I navigate that is just by eating, but I'm not even consciously do it. And I'll say, tell me about your day. Like, just walk me through your day. And I get exhausted listening to their day. So when I like repeat back their day, they're like, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah, like that overstimulation of, and think of like your mind and your body trying to regulate that. Like it's trying to be like, hey, remember that time you probably need to eat? Oh, never mind. It's a meeting. And like, you're like navigating physiological cues. And then like your brain is trying to schedule. And that's a lot of stuff. And no wonder why you would feel so dysregulated and not thinking clearly that you would gravitate to something that just gives you a quick fix, right? So if we were able to just help our nervous system to regulate and like decompress a little bit, we're able to think a little more with more clarity, and our logical mind can come into play, and we can make those clear, conscious choices for ourselves without the emotionally driven decisions, like the fight or flight or freeze, and being able to say like, no, just like whatever this person needs in this moment, because we're freaking out over here. Like it's being able to regulate that for yourself.
Yeah. I feel like so much like every day we feel like I have to be super successful financially. I have to be super successful, fitness and health wise. I have to be an amazing parent. Like, and we're inundated so much with like, I have to be the best at everything. And so, yeah, like it kind of goes right around to that. Like you look at someone's day and it's like, well, no wonder you're exhausted. Like there is no dysregulation because you feel like I have to be the best at everything. And you have to like have a million different plates spinning at once. And so it can be hard, especially as we bring clients on and like, they're wanting to lose body fat. They're wanting to, do this fitness wise. And like, it is important to like, okay, where are you at within the context of your life? And what does your day look like? Because can we even add this extra thing onto your plate right now? Maybe even in terms of like, hey, I want to drop 20, 30 pounds. Mentally, that's a hard thing to do, right? Like, because now you have to track every day. You have to get to the gym. You have to do your cardio. And so just to even talk through that with somebody is so important. I think too, is like, just even getting them to realize their cues or to even take that small step back and go, okay, where do I have those triggers? Because I find even just a lot of people aren't even aware of that. Like we get so caught up in just our day-to-day life and it just kind of, it's just a circle, right? It's almost like a Groundhog Day. You just do it and you do it and you do it. And you maybe don't even realize like some of those things that you do, right? Like we easily blind ourselves to these little habits and to these little things. And so just even to kind of have, that you have that cue, you have that trigger, stop, realize it, and then kind of go, okay, take that step back. So yeah, I'm learning a lot. I think this is going to be fantastic for a lot of our clients too. And just even being aware of it, right? And reworking those neural grooves of just being even aware of these type of things.
Yeah, it is important to recognize too, like our brain operates off organization, like off of programming, right? And that is how we kind of show up in the world. And to some extent, like this is a beautiful thing. There's probably, I don't know if I ever talked about this on the podcast, but if you think about like driving to the grocery store or driving, like if I drive my kids to school, sometimes I get there and I'm like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, I don't remember doing any of this, but it's on auto because I do it all the time. My brain has it programmed. It accesses that program and I do it. The same as being able to know, like every time you get into your car, if you know how to drive, typically you don't have to think, okay, like right foot does this, left foot does this. Do I even use my left foot? Like you don't have to navigate that. You just do it. So it's a beautiful skill that our body is able to do. Sometimes though, it does it to our own kind of like, I guess, not to our advantage at all. And so to be able to step away and say, what kind of programs are in existence right now that like don't align well with how I want to show up for myself and how I want to show up in the world. Yeah. And also being able to simplify those things. So Tyler, you said like doing the best, doing more. A great thing that I have my clients do, I had them draw a huge circle, and in that circle is your mind. And a lot of the times we have this like constant mind chatter. I know for myself, it's like a laundry list that's like pathetic sometimes. Like I could like be answering an email, but thinking about texting my brother who's supposed to change over his tires because he told me that last week. I should probably check in. I don't need to do that. Like, I don't have time for that, nor does my mental capacity like expand to that. So to be able to draw a huge circle, word vomit everything that's like going on, all of the thoughts that's like chit chattering in there, and then be able to only highlight, you can't highlight everything, but only highlight the things that are of great importance to you. All the other stuff, cross off. Like you don't need to make sure that the mailbox like is fixed a certain way, or like you don't need to do that, or like you don't need to get pumpkins already because the Smiths got pumpkins on their porch. Like that's not of importance, right? And it's taking up space, and that space, like once it's filled to a max, we can't think clear anymore, and we are immersed in everything with emotion, right? Once we clear up space, we have a little bit more room, and we can think without attached emotion. We become like distanced from things and have a different perspective to then execute a better plan for ourselves.
Right. That's where, I think for me, like exercise first thing on days where I feel super stressed out too, can kind of help me like organize a lot of that. And that was something with today, like there's a million things I want to get done. And a lot of it, like my poor husband is like, you're being ridiculous. Like my mom is a mom of 4 and a grandmother of 6. And they're all like everything's going to be fine while I'm gone. Right. But we've like hung up shelves in my bathroom yesterday and like took stuff to storage that was not going to be in her way. And like, you get all of the little things where you're like, okay, everything has to be completely perfect. Like we're going to be gone for like 4 days. It's not even that big of a deal. And I've never done so much laundry in my life. I never organize my children's outfits for them. Like I'm very much like, do your own thing. Even Ben, I have laid out all of their outfits, like 100%. So no one has to think while I'm gone, but I took on like all of this thinking, right? And so I woke up this morning, and I think after the weekend, I just kind of hit my limit of like thinking and was like, I'm just going to go for a run. Like I could definitely use that hour to do everything on my list, or like a good portion of it, but I have to go do like that. And that's when a lot of my like most organizational thinking can happen, because your body just kind of goes on autopilot. And I'm like, just, forward is my pace for right now, and just kind of do that like word vomit thing of like what actually needs to happen. And it can be a good reset button. And so Tyler, I was going to ask you about like with parenting and stuff. Cause I know for Vic and I, like we do a lot of outdoor walks because we have like a park right next to our house, and it takes about 10 minutes to get around the loop. And like, especially on hot days, it's funny you brought up like the comfort, because for me, that's like a big thing. If I hit my limit with stuff, sometimes I just have to go outside, and it's not about exercise or increasing my NEAT or anything. I just want to go walk around the loop for like real quick, get warm, listen to some birds, and then come back to the house. So that's actually like a non-negotiable in my client plans, is that everybody has to get at least 1 10-minute walk outside. Like, unless it's raining, nobody wants water on their face, but like I'll do it in the winter and like bundle up in a coat and get outside to get some sun on my face and stuff like that. And so with parenting, have you guys, especially in toddlerhood, because 3 is one of the best ages, but also one of the hardest ages, I feel like. Have you guys come up with any like go-to strategies that are serving you right now?
Yeah. The emotions are very much becoming big right now. Like if we don't get Baby Shark, it's a full meltdown sometimes, right? Like it's a lot of those things. For myself, I certainly like my 10-minute walks, like even during like a work day, like just to like break up the day, get like a little refresher, that kind of stuff. I would say for like both of us, like we're both still into sports quite a bit. And so like my wife Stephanie, she plays rugby. So she still has rugby a couple times a week. I know like that's a great reset because I mean she's also a full-time working mom, 40, 50 hours a week, like is a general manager at a business. So, has a lot of on her mind too. And a lot of she manages people. And so like a lot of the time, sometimes the last thing she wants to do is manage a kid too. So for her, it's certainly rugby practice a couple times a week. And then she'll, occasionally play on Saturdays. For myself, now that fall's here, I'll play hockey, once or twice a week. So for us, it is a lot of just physical activity, I think, because that is our background. We'll go for bike rides together as well as a family. Like we'll do that. So yeah, I think for us, it is just kind of a lot of that stuff. And I think making sure too that like we have alone time at home and one of the parents is just hanging out with the kid. And it's just having just even that hour where it's just, hey, I'm just going to go watch a little bit of TV and just decompress a little and just relax. Like even this last Saturday night, we dropped Quinn off with my dad and mom for the night, 24 hours, no kid. We were going to celebrate just Steph's birthday. And we honestly, we even kind of talked about it beforehand. Like we don't have to talk. Like, our lives, and not just ours, but I think everybody, our lives can become so loud and there's always so much going on. And we're talking about finances and we're talking about jobs and we're talking about careers and kids. And like, we barely talked. We went to the grocery store. We bought a bunch of food. We made a really nice dinner together, nice bottle of wine, and we watched a movie and we just enjoyed each other's company. And I think too, like, all of this kind of stuff is just finding the importance of just being and relaxing and just, I think, enjoying time together or enjoying some alone time and just, really having those things where you are able to kind of have that reset, fill your cup up a little bit, whatever that might look like. And it's a lot of, talking back and forth. Okay, what do you need? What do you need? Like, and a lot of those things I find can be just really helpful in making sure that, as a parent unit or even just individual, you are being the best you can be for whatever it might be. Because I think a lot of people look at it too as taking a step back for themselves as a bad thing. It's like, well, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be there in your best capacity for whoever might need you, right? It's like, if I'm not doing that, then I can't be, the best parent for Quinn, or I can't be the best husband for Quinn, or the best coach for my clients if my cup isn't full. Like sometimes certainly you do have to just push through. I like that's part of it, but taking that time to really just, making sure that you can bring your best, I think is pretty important too. So a little bit of a tangent there on top of what we also do to kind of relax. But yeah, I think it just underscores the importance of taking that time and making sure that the parts of you are feeling fulfilled and ready to go as well.
Yeah. That is so, you mentioned a few things that I was thinking about, but when I was going through, I was a director at like a fitness and health club, and I did personal training. I was a fitness consultant. I brought on a new kind of company, Genovix, that was amazing. Like there were a lot of moving parts happening. I think I was like prepping for the world championship. I was like, I got this. I can do all of this. And I had a client say to me, because at that time, it was like innately in me to really care about people and talk about like their emotional well-being and their mental state and all of that stuff. And one client was like, I have to pause you for a second. Who takes care of you? And I couldn't answer that question. I just started bawling. I was like, no one. It was so sad. But I think sometimes we should ask that question for ourselves, like, who's taking care of me? And can I do a better job at taking care of me, right? Like, if I can set up my support and I have all my resources, that is great. It's a beautiful thing, and you should have that. But sometimes those resources aren't available, right? And sometimes, even for me, like some of the mindset clients that I have, I'm not always available. So I want to be able to instill in them, like, at the end of the day, I want you to answer that question. Will I take care of me? And this is how I take care of me. This is how I go through challenges. This is how I regulate my emotions. This is how I am able to do that. And if it helps you to see it from a different lens and say, sometimes this will help with like distancing and seeing it from like a different perspective, but being able to say, well, Christina does this for herself, like seeing it from a different way, speaking it in a different way. Like Danika does XYZ to make sure that like she is able to feel more stable, or whatever that may be. Like use yourself, your own name, and look at it from like a third party perspective. But that question is really important. And I ask almost all my clients that when I find that they're feeling torn or pulled in so many different directions, like, who takes care of you? And just a simple question, but a really hard question.
Yeah, it's because it's hard to do that. Like, you feel selfish. Like, and I know for myself, like, part of that is sitting down and just zoning out and playing video games for a couple hours. And I think like there's a part of me that feels so guilty doing that. I'm like, well, I could be working on my business. I could be doing this. I could be doing this. But I think like if I don't do that, I'm not going to be able to do all of these other things. And I think like it's okay to be lazy. Like, you know, like within context, of course. I know we talked about at the beginning of how like, well, so, you know, nowadays, like it's so hard to maybe like, you know, lean into that hard work. We are always looking for convenience and things like that. And there is a certain amount of self-honesty you have to have of like, okay, maybe I am playing a little bit too much video games and, you know, I could do a little bit more work, but it's okay to be lazy in those instances if that's what allows you to reset and to get back to it. It's okay to occasionally, for myself, I'll take a Friday and be like, you know what? I'm just not going to do anything today. I'm just going to do what feels best for me. I might go read. I love to read for fun. So I'll go read a book, or I'll go for a few walks, or I'll plop down in front of the TV and play some video games. And I always come out of that, boom, hit that refresh button. Let's go. And I almost use sometimes a little bit of that guilt to like, all right, let's go into this next week and let's do a little bit more. Like let's push a little. And so yeah, it's a very hard thing to do, but it is one of the best things you can do, because I think it just allows you to bring more energy to those things where our conscious mind like knows where we want to be and what we're striving for.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm the same way where, I mean, my husband, he's so funny. He keeps trying to get me into video games because they're very much his thing too, where he's like, you would love this if you would try it, and you should just sit down and like focus on this thing, because it's super hard for me to turn my brain off. And like, so we've started having one of the kids coaches over, like they've become good friends, and they play Magic, like the cards.
Oh, Magic the Gathering. Okay.
They're super into it.
Yeah.
And I always kind of like linger nearby, and they keep trying to get me to play, and I sit and listen to it, and I'm like, guys, this just is not my jam, but like, I'm really happy you're happy. And while they do that, like the kids will be downstairs doing their own thing, and I just kind of like putter around the house, and like I'll be doing dishes, or like this weekend I just cooked and like put way more effort into like making pizzas. And it was like silly things like making a balsamic glaze and like caramelizing onions and like stuff that takes forever, that sometimes I'm just like, we're just going to skip that tonight because I don't care about it. But like for me, that can be something where I'm like semi zoned out, but focusing on something I enjoy doing. And so it's kind of like that same thing. But I know it can be hard for me to even give into that if there's like I'm a big one for visual clutter. If I'm surrounded by visual clutter, it like crushes me. And so I know for me to get to that place where I can sit down and do nothing, I generally have to do that first. And I was even talking to our oldest about it because so he's got ADHD and like I do too. And so I try to talk to him about strategies where I'm like, I didn't know when I was a kid and like I know now. And so like for me, like, you know, mom gets super grumpy or like feels out of control when all of these other things are like going on. And so I make a point for myself. I know what's going to bug me. So I try to just take care of it first so that it's easier for me to do other things and show up in other ways for you and stuff like that. So I've been trying to teach him, like, maybe you'd feel better if you took care of these other things like around you, and then your brain would feel a bit more organized. And then you can truly just do what you're doing, like focus and like things like that. And so I think it's good to kind of have an understanding of both, like, but we all need that. Like for me, it's a bathtub and like a trashy book. Like give me that any day and I'll just go hide for an hour. I can be really bad about getting stuck on my phone and like scrolling Instagram, and that does not help me. Like that's the last thing I need. And like for a lot of the reasons that Danika was talking about, because then you see like, oh shit, like I haven't started decorating for fall yet. Should I be on that? Or like, I didn't buy Halloween costumes or whatever. And you start getting in, you know, and then your list gets bigger and bigger. And then it's like, oh my God, now I feel even worse than before I started to try to zone out.
Yeah, or you see all the grinding posts. If you're not grinding, you're not. I'm like, shit.
Yeah,
like,
and it's like, you know what? Like 95% of the time, yes, I am that person, but I'm in my 5% and I need to own it and lean into it and leave me alone.
I'll even find like sometimes like I mean, I have ADHD too. And so like if I sit down before a day of work, sometimes I'll just vacuum the whole house. And like that, like I find that type of like cleaning can then get me focused and into a work mode, because it's like this, I can actively see something improving in real time, right? And so I think it's almost like that, like, all right, now we can get into that mode of like, okay, now I need to sit down and focus for a couple of hours. And that's too where like the walks come into play too, is like I've sat down for 2 hours, I focus, I can feel the brain starting to go away. Quick reset. Yeah,
I think it is
the program.
You have to make your environment conducive to the program that you want to execute to and pull from, and being able to look at your environment. I have said, one of my clients was like, I feel like I'm all over the place, and also like I'm just pulled in every single direction. And I said to her, I adore you, but from the looks of it that I can see behind you, your office is very cluttered, and no wonder why you always feel like you're all over the place. What if we started there? Like that environment that you're always in, what if we provided a space that kind of like fed into the organization and took away the stress and took away that anxious feeling? What would that do if we created more environments around us? That's why I say like an environment of like going in the bathtub or taking a shower is very different from like sitting in the kitchen. Like if someone's like, I really struggle when I get home from eating, I wouldn't say, well, I just want you to sit crisscross applesauce in the middle of your kitchen. Like I probably wouldn't do that to you unless we were really going at it. But
stare at the fridge, tell yourself I can't have
stare
it.
right at that fridge. Open up the pantry.
Like exposure therapy.
It is exposure therapy. But I think it is important to create an environment and detox that environment, right? I know for myself, I have I'm diagnosing myself now, but I feel as though I have extreme health anxiety. I am always like, oh my gosh, that was just a palpitation. I definitely have congested heart failure happening right now.
Here we go.
There's probably like, and there's tingling up the back of my head. I'm about to have an aneurysm. Like I can like go in a deep spiral, and my husband will look at me and be like, I'm exhausted by you. Like if you could just stop. And I feel for him, like you think you're exhausted, try living inside this. Like I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But if you know that like for instance, I just had that kind of happen, so it's easy to talk about now, but I was like, I looked up something on YouTube, like a correct form of something, and there was like so many medical things coming up because that was my most recent search. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go do not interested, not interested, not interested. So that I like decluttered that and I detoxed it. So when I go on YouTube again, it's not like right in my face, like type 1 diabetes failure with like everything. So I can create my own negative space, right? Or we can create a different space that we're thriving through. And the same would go even like tactics with food. I have a lot of clients who are like, but it's always there. And I'm like, okay, but who's buying it? Like if somebody is like out, like you have an outsourced person, first off, if you have somebody that goes grocery shopping for you, like awesome, because I want that. But second, if you are buying things that like aren't conducive to your goals, and it's just presenting like a constant challenge, and you're noticing that like your state of change, you're just not there yet, don't put it in front of yourself yet. Like maybe down the road we could be exposed to that, but not yet. Like make your environment more conducive to you thriving instead of trudging through the mud to try to get through, trying to like say, well, everything is a challenge, everything is an obstacle. Are you creating that challenge, or are you enabling that challenge? What part do you play in that challenge that exists for you?
There's a reason that we don't have bags of chips in the house. Like, right? Like it just, because they're not going to last very long. There is a reason. And I think like, you know, you were talking about, you know, creating that space that you can thrive in. And it kind of, you know, I was thinking, you know, more in that mental headspace, right? And I think too, we have to recognize if we're so used to being, you know, in this tract of maybe getting into a spiral or, you know, thinking in a certain way, it's also going to take some time to get out of that as well. And I think, again, recognizing that you're not going to be perfect right away. You are not just going to break that habit right away or that mindset right away. It's going to be hard because your brain isn't used to going that way. It's going to go to what is comfortable, to what you're used to, you know, because that track has no dust on it whatsoever. Even if it is negative and it doesn't want to be where we, you know, want to be consciously, subconsciously, it's going to be very easy to go that route. And it's continuing to just even recognize that this is okay. I'm going to allow it, but then I'm also going to recognize, you know, for what it is and recognize, okay, this is okay, but I know this isn't where I want to go. I'm going to allow this to happen, but I'm also going to allow myself to start working on this other track. And for myself, what I have found really helpful is I've got like little note cards with sayings right here sitting on my desk. And there are a lot of like consciously what I know where I want to go. And I'm sitting at my desk, you know, 8-9 hours a day. And these are constantly right there. I'm reading them, reminding myself of like where I want to go and trying to just rework those neural patterns so that they do become subconscious, right? And they do become automatic, and that I don't have to almost consciously work at those anymore, because that is at the point where I am at. But eventually it's going to get to that subconscious part. It's just it's like I don't decide to go work out anymore. I just go. It's part of who I am nowadays, right? I don't decide to track my food or anything like this. It just happens nowadays. Like, and so it's the same with anything that we've been talking about today. These things that you want to do that might be hard, you're going to have to consciously work at them. until they become something that is subconscious and just part of who you are.
Yeah, I love the example that Danica had brought up with driving, because I think
Yeah.
it's something that when you're first learning can be so stressful. Like, here you are operating this like gigantic piece of machinery that can either be safe or can be deadly. And we tell children, like, okay, go figure it out. Like, don't go too fast, wear your seatbelt. And, it's funny because like Riker is like, I just, there's things, because now we live in the world of Uber. He's like, can't I just Uber everywhere? Because it just sounds like something I don't need to be responsible for, is like the way he's looking at it at 10. And I'm like, okay, but as you get older, trust me, you're going to want to be a part of this. And, but I can see where he's coming from with it. And then as you learn it, you get through the fear of like, wait, you want me to merge onto the freeway going from like, I'm doing 30 and now I have to do 70. Like, I have to do that safely. And now you can take a freeway to somewhere you have to go every day, not be thinking about what you're doing at all, and be like, shit, did I run red lights on the way here? And like, you don't even remember.
Got through a crosswalk and I'm like, thank God someone wasn't walking, because I was not even paying attention.
Right. I'll have moments where like all of a sudden you like come to while you're driving and you're like, oh, thank God I didn't feel any bumps. Like, especially with kids in the car, where I'm like, the whole time I'm looking in my rear view mirror, like giving them the eyes, telling them to stop arguing and like things like that. And, it's something that can have a lot of fear in it. It requires focus in the beginning. And then, all of a sudden you're in your 30s and it takes no thought. And so I think, a lot of the lifestyle changes are just that same thing where you have to get through the fear of merging that stuff in. But I think the discussion of the programs was a really important one, because when you're trying to, get rid of some of those programs, that's why, I know I for sure don't have people make a gigantic, like 1 million lifestyle changes all at once. I'm sure you guys don't, because like, I feel like the brain just can't handle a full reprogramming, like the last thing I'm going to do is sit at my Mac right now and be like, you know what, today I'm going to make you run Windows and like try to figure all of that out and switch all of my things over. Because that would be a nightmare and I would hate it instantly. And no wonder I would be like, screw it, I'm going back to Mac, because it would just be so frustrating and not conducive to a smooth change. And so that's why we don't want to do that same thing with lifestyle changes. And we alter like little programs at a time, try to have the changes kind of complement each other as we introduce new ones, so that you can kind of build into that a little bit, because it makes the changes and the mindset barriers that much easier to be like, well, I did really good with adding breakfast into my routine. And like, now that's pretty normal for me. It wouldn't be that crazy for me to add a serving of vegetables to my lunch now, but if all of a sudden it was like, oh, you eat 11 grams of fiber per day, tomorrow I want you to start eating 60 and just have fun. Like, no one's going to do that.
Yeah, their tummy wouldn't feel very good either.
No, I have a stomach ache for you. Like,
yeah. If you've never tracked macros before, well, we're probably not going to just jump into tracking every single gram of protein, carbs, and fats. That's a recipe for failure. Let's maybe just track some calories and see how that goes, and start weighing out a little bit of food. And like, we want to create the right amount of challenge so that it sensitizes the people to keep going, but also not so much where it's like, oh, this is impossible, I'm never gonna fucking do it, right? And then they're just back to where they are, right? So it's like finding that sweet little spot where you're getting enough challenge but not too much.
Yeah, I think too, recognizing when people are afraid of the challenge that's presented in themselves, or they have these like mental blocks. I listened to a recent podcast and I loved how they talked about, I always say to my clients, well, what have you been able to accomplish? Like, what are some big challenges that you've been able to accomplish? But if you segmented your life in like 3-year phases, like the age of 0 to 3, 3 to 6, and then you jotted down what you have accomplished. Think about what you accomplish in years 0 to 3. There's a lot of stuff. Like you learn how to walk, like, right?
Talk.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Talk, like you're,
Those are big things.
yeah. And then if you even like take it a step further, like 3 to 6, you're learning like how to ride your bike, how to interact in social environments, like how to be able to have empathy for somebody. Like there are so many big things. And if you were to realize and recognize like, wow, I've been able to create change, adapt, like I've been able to do this whole time. Like what makes this so special that I can't do this, right? This isn't, in comparison to learning how to walk, this is probably not that big, right? Like I can do this. If my body can do all these things and my mind had to apply certain, like, I got this, like I'm going to persevere and I'm going to stay resilient. I still have that. That's still a thing that's inside of me that I can tap into. I can do this now.
Yeah. Like you can tie your shoes. I don't know if you've taught your girls yet, Danika, to do a hair tie, like put their hair into a ponytail.
Yes. So only
I'm still learning how to do
only
that.
one. The 6-year-old knows how to. And I love it because it's amazing. I'm always like, all right, you're ready for school? Fantastic. Like
Right.
I'll help her a little bit, but that's a pretty that's a tough thing to do. You know what I mean? Like it's not that easy. Even though to us it might be like to just put your hair up in a ponytail, but for a little one to try to figure that out and then like take it a step further and try to have them like do 2. My like little one knows how to like separate and try to do 2 or a braid. Like I know that it seems trivial, but it was them seeing a challenge, being presented with it, and not just going to mommy or daddy and saying like, hey, can you put up my hair?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This weekend, I was making breakfast with Cora, and I despise cooking with children because it's a mess. But they like to do it, and it's important to them. So I try to quiet my brain down and stand behind them while I'm like, crawling out of my skin. And Cora was just trying to crack eggs, and like was having some trouble with it. And she's so funny because she'll like she got like shells in there or something. So I was like, okay, let me take over and I'll do this. And she's like, I'm not very good at it, but this is only like my 2nd time. So I'm sure it'll get better. I'm just not very good at it. And like,
cute.
but she says it in a way that's not like, I'll never be able to do this. She's like, I'm just not very good at this yet. And I love that she tacks the yet onto it, like at the end, because she's like, she will do it at some point. And like now she can do her own hair and she loves it. I'll go in and like clean it up because especially the pigtails, like she can do it, but they're just a bit wonky. And I'm like, I can't send you out of the house this way. But I think it is like, it's funny because it's one of those things where as an adult, you don't realize that the motor skills to do some of these things are really hard for like small minds that haven't experienced it yet to do. And so they have to figure it out. And then, you just have to kind of look at it the same way when we're taking on things where it's like, they have to, like, they're still learning to be a human. We can make these small shifts with like that stuff. And so that's one of the things about having kids around that, if you keep your brain open to kind of paying attention to that stuff, it can be really helpful.
And I think that's even just good for our clients and people listening, like who are kind of on this fitness journey. It's like, I'm just not good at it yet, but with practice, I'm going to continue to get better. Like, we just started Quinn in swim lessons and I'm like, I don't necessarily remember learning how to swim. Like as a kid, you just learn how to swim. I don't necessarily remember the process of doing that. And so now going through this is super interesting in terms of the motor skill and like seeing Quinn trying to figure this out of like, how do I swim? I'm like, yeah, this is kind of cool. Like I'm actually getting to see this process unfold now as an adult with something like I just take for granted that I know how to swim, right? Like, and so, being able to see this, watching her get frustrated and like, working through this whole process is very interesting. And like, as an adult and a dad, how can I come alongside her now and help her get through this challenge of being like, I'm in the pool with her. So you're actively there kind of with her and really trying to come alongside of her and be like, yes, you can do this. You can learn how to do this. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to fail. It's kind of almost the first experience of something along those lines where, you know, she is aware now of some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, hopefully we're just doing them all like good service with what they end up doing later, and like jumping into that stuff and saying, you know, I'll get there. It's funny, the little things that can make you super proud with kids, like the word yet, where you're like, hell yeah, girlfriend. Because my oldest is much more defeatist when it comes to stuff. And like, that's hard sometimes because he'll just get very frustrated and want to walk away. And then we, you know, we'll get into the like, castles don't quit, like keep trying and like try to push him with stuff. And, you know, then it's interesting too, like with coaching with stuff where you want to make sure that you're helping people build that yet, you know, like we said, like you will get there. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's what I'm always like putting out too. Like I'm never expecting perfection, just effort, just trying, you know. And that's a big part of the coaching experience too, and why it's nice to have a human on the other end of it and not just use apps and things like that, is to say like, I'm struggling with this, or like my mindset is getting in the way, like how do I work around this and things like that, and having those discussions so that we can share like our own experiences in that kind of stuff. Like I feel silly a lot of the times with like some of the things I'll put on Instagram because I'm like, this probably seems like so like duh or like boring or something like that for people who have hung around for a while. But then sometimes it is just the little things of being like, oh, well, this is how Danika had dealt with her weekend that was like heavy or whatever, and how they decompressed, or like this is how they plan that, or like something. And it helps to see like other humans are going through things. It's not all, you know, perfect Instagram, and like this is how we work through it.
Yeah. And just because I think another really quick point, just because you're an adult doesn't mean that like you should have everything figured out, like, or doesn't mean that you should know how to you know, let out emotions or be able to self-regulate. Like it doesn't mean that like you can't still learn these skills. And you also shouldn't harp on yourself. There are many times that I say with my clients, they'll be like, I just don't understand why I can't do this, or like I should know this. I'm like, well, you were never taught it. Like
Right.
and that's okay, because we have this wild ability to learn new skills no matter what age we are, right? And that doesn't have to be a physical skill, it can be a mental skill. So knowing that like you have permission to not know everything yet, and to be able to say, but I'm willing to change and I'm willing to try to get there so I can learn this, so that I can have better adaptive skills.
Yeah, 100%. Another good one, guys. That was fun.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Any final pieces, Tyler?
I don't know. I mean, Danika ended it really well there, but I think it's just don't stop learning, you know, don't stop pushing, have some grace with yourself. I think, you know, it's very easy to be so hard on ourselves. Trust me, I'm my own. I think we're all our own worst enemies, because we all know our own flaws and our own failures. And I think we tend to focus on those a lot. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think, you know, that can kind of tell us where we need to work and improve on. But I think, yeah, give yourself some grace. Like, you know, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to not be perfect. Like Danika was saying, it's okay to not know how to be great at everything. And yeah, it is okay. Just continue to put in the effort, you know, continue to work. Some days are going to be better than others. And you know what? I think as long as you're, you know, genuinely wanting to improve, you are going to improve. It is just going to happen. It just might take some time. And so, you know, give yourself that patience and grace.
Yeah, and you can always, we're always evolving and creating our own identity, right? We don't have to just relive the storyline over and over and over again and identify with certain things in the past that may have happened. Like you can create your own identity and continue to evolve it. And you, just because you can't do something, to identify like, well, this is who I am and I just can't do it. No, I'm sorry, but I won't let you hold on to that story and program that doesn't serve you well. So, and I think all of us kind of stand by that with our clients.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. Well, that was a lot of fun, and I'm so glad we got to have you on, Danika. So hopefully we get to
thank you
again soon. We always hit like the deep stuff that leave me thinking for a while. So this was awesome. You guys know where to find us. If you, it would be wonderful if you left a review, or if you're watching us on YouTube, pop over and hit the little like button and leave us a comment. It helps a whole lot. And if you have any ideas of things you'd like us to chat about, or anything that maybe you think would be helpful for you to hear or for others to hear, we are always open for suggestions with that. And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.